I had every intention, up to about 2 o'clock yesterday, to continue with our Lenten series on how Jesus saves, which would have been up to Jesus and Atonement, the Spirit Awakens Redux. And that would have looked at part of our redemption called recapitulation, or sometimes the mystical or physical theory, which has a particular focus in addressing the problem of human obedience and disobedience to God, and with quite incredible implications for our own spiritual journeys. But the Spirit awakened within me, as it were, and I felt moved to go down a different path. You may be very relieved to hear. So we're going to explore the parable of the Prodigal Son and how God can speak to us through this extraordinary story which Jesus told. And in doing that, I'm going to draw on a presentation I gave at St George's Cathedral last year, which explored this parable through the lens of Henry Nouwen's book, The Return of the Prodigal Son. So what you've got today is actually a 21st century reflection on a 20th century reflection on a 17th century painting which reflects on a 1st century parable. Apart from that, it's all original material. But this parable, it's like a roadmap for the spiritual journey. It can bring forth countless insights as it points to problems of the human condition, paths and dangers on the spiritual journey, and the blessings which come through the process of spiritual maturing. So let's have a look at the two sons and their father in this parable. We may look at the youngest son and think he's rude and insolent, but it's worse than that. Because in the cultural context, the son's leaving home in the manner that he did is the equivalent of saying, "Father, I cannot wait for you to die." That's how extreme it is. It is a stunning rejection. And it's all the more shocking because it actually seems like he had it pretty good in life. He had it pretty good. He had security, he was loved, he had a family, he had a future, but he rejected it all and leaves home. And in that example of the youngest son, depending on your own life story, you may hear something that speaks to your spirit and what it means to have left home. What it means to have left home. We flee the hands of blessing. We flee home and run off to chase our identity in a distant country. Go and prove you're worth something. Go and chase this or that pleasure. Which raises the question, how far have you run from the voice who would call you beloved? How far have you run from that voice? What are those places in your soul which continue to resist that voice, which claims you as a daughter or son of God? We have vast freedom in being children of God. Vast freedom. We can go entirely wayward. And we can also return to the Father. So the youngest son, he's like a parable all in himself. He's not just one repentant sinner. He's all of us. Each one of us on that journey back to God. So his journey kind of sums up the history of our salvation. But there's more to the story. And the youngest son may speak to some of us strongly, those who have gone wayward, not looking at anyone in particular. But for others, maybe the elder son is the one with whom we resonate. And actually, I think for a lot of lifelong Christians, he is the one which gets greater sympathy. He's always done his duty, fulfilled his obligations, gone along with his father's agenda, worked hard, and all that. But the sad thing is, he was not happy and he was not free. He had a curiosity about the things his wayward brother got up to, and an envy about the activities which he condemned outwardly, but wondered about partaking in all the same. So on the exterior, he was observant, he was good, but on the inside, he had wandered very far from his father too. So when he's confronted with the father's love and forgiveness for the younger son, for his brother, this hidden darkness erupts. And we get a bit of an insight into what was holding him in bondage. Anger, envy, self-righteousness. So he had a tremendous inner battle going on. So was he really at home in his father's love, even though he was physically close to his father? Or was he just as lost? So in fact, I think returning home as the youngest son, even though there would have been a lot of deep shame to work through in that, it kind of seems easier than returning home from the cold anger and resentment which belonged to the elder son. So how does the elder son's return to the father take place? And how does our homecoming occur if that sort of inner battle is close to our own experience? And this is really important to navigate carefully, as there is actually a lot to honour in the virtues linked with remaining close to the Father. There are a lot of virtues in that. But how can you excise those resentments without cutting out the virtues too? So ultimately, like the younger son, the elder son cannot experience redemption apart from his father. So recognizing that he is lost too is important. And he needs to allow himself to be found by God and healed by the Father's love. And then commit to trusting and expressing gratitude that God's love, his Father's love and promises are enough. And to really take it into his heart that the Father wants him home just as much as the younger. The Father wants to embrace the older just as much as the younger. The Father does not love the younger son more than the elder son. He goes out to meet the older son where he was too and gives him that assurance. My son, you're always with me. All I have is yours. And a little aside, the Greek word there is child in a gender-neutral sense. So daughters, you're all good as well. But for the elder son, the priority, his homecoming, is found in the need to think, act, and speak with the conviction that he is sought and valued just as much as the younger. And to live with gratitude as a discipline, a choice, a disposition in response to all of life as pure gift. The Father rejoices, yes, in one child that was lost and is then found. And the calling of the elder son is to enter into that joy, to be able to claim that joy for himself. So I think we've got the the elder and the younger son in all of us. There's a part of them in each of us. And we may very well have seasons where one is more dominant than the other. But either way, the Father extends love to each. Which brings us on to the Father in the story. God, creator of heaven and earth, has chosen to be, first and foremost, a Father. That is how Jesus teaches us to pray. Our Father in heaven. Though if you want to translate that to mother or parent in your mind, then go for it. So you right, little mate? So as Father, he makes it so the children are free to leave home. God makes it so we're all free to leave home. We can wander afar and lose everything. And we can also return and find love and forgiveness and welcome. For the children who remain at home, the Father longs for them to just enjoy being in his presence and delighting in the things which he delights in. But he cannot force those children who remain at home to love him in return. He cannot force that. So in terms of our own spiritual journey, we could ask, is returning to the Father's home and embrace the ultimate call? Is that the ultimate call? Or could it also involve growing into and becoming the father and mother who welcomes others home and calls for the celebration? Could you have a ministry as the father or mother who does that? In any case, as baptized Christians, we are people on a journey in being conformed to the divine image of the Son of God. Or as Paul said in that second reading which we heard, as people in Christ, we are a new creation. We are ambassadors for Christ and his ministry of reconciliation. So where are you on the journey? Where are you on that journey? How close to or far from the Father are you? In what ways is the Father calling you home at this moment? And how can you be an agent in God calling others home? My prayer is that we all know the Father's love and the Father's embrace, that we hear his call to be at home in that love, and that in that we can rejoice. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.